I'm Tom. So recently, over the summer with the university, I completed a scholarship placement where I did some research into farmland biodiversity monitoring using song. So I'm just going to talk about the project today. So a bit of background. A few years ago, the government came out with a few land management schemes that are listed here. So what they were is a list of recommendations for farmland to improve their biodiversity, and if they could quantify that and prove that they were improving it, then they could get funding. So we need to improve the biodiversity. So often when you're looking at biodiversity, we're looking at the plants and insects because they're the most sensitive to change. They're very diverse, but you need too much expertise to identify them. It's quite hard to. So then we come to birds as sort of the next group. They're a very good indicator. They're super easy to spot. We don't need that much expertise. So they can be a really good way to quantify the biodiversity. So surveying birds in so many different ways. These are the main ones. Camera trapping, it's not super viable because the birds are all different heights. You know, like mammals, you can't find a triangle that they've been walking back and forth on, so it's just harder to get them on the cameras. And then visual surveying, you need someone to go out constantly with the birds, and it's time consuming and expensive. And then there's existing audio surveys like Merlin, which I'm sure many of you have on your phones, but we'll talk a bit more about it. It's a flawed thing. So the way it works, it takes a 1 second segment throughout the recording, and these often cut most of the important bits of the song off, and they lead to false IDs. So there'll be a bit more on that later, but I don't like it, and I don't think any of you should use it anymore. Right, so the solution is we want some way to record the birds in the tree singing, and then to bring that device back to a computer that can tell us what the bird is. So with this project, I've made a plan for untrained farmers who don't know about biodiversity to take these microphones, put them out for a 2-week period, bring them in, and then I've made my own bird recognizing AI that will tell you what birds were in your recording. So these were the aims. We wanted to get 250 calls for each species, but because I was doing this project on my own over 8 weeks, I only had the time to do 10 key species, so we had to choose them very carefully as well. And as I said, to use the edge impulse to create an AI. So these are the species we picked, me and my supervisor. I'm sure you all recognise many of them. Some important ones, the yellow hammer, they're like a really, really good indicator. That was like the one we really wanted to find, that was, they live in sort of field edges and stuff, so a lot of the conservation measures are about how you manage your hedgerows and how you manage the grass at the edge of the fields, which is the same for the skylarks, so that part of the edge of the field that you're not meant to mow and you let it grow so the birds can nest in it. So a lot of these are just similar things, and they're only going to be present on that the most biodiverse farmland, so it's the most time efficient. But then you run into some issues. So the red star is one of the birds on our list, and I'll just play this song for you. That's gone longer than I thought. You can see though, when it's making the noise, it's sort of making these 3 noises, and then it's that sharper black line on the spectrum just below the picture. So if you took a 5-second window, which is what I've decided to do for my project, it captures that whole thing. But if you just take the 1 second like Merlin does, then you can hear, this is the chiff-chaff, and it sounds very, very similar. So to ID these birds, we had to add chiff-chaff into the list, because otherwise, chiff-chaff is very common, and red stars would keep coming up when they weren't present. So if you were to do a broader list of birds than 10, this kind of stuff would come up a lot more. And then there's also the problem that birds change their song seasonally. So with the chiff-chaff, I'll just play the 2 for you. and then the same one we had a second ago. I didn't think there were this long recordings. The songs are just so different that you have to prioritise. So I was doing this project in the summer, so I was looking at the song that they would be doing in the summer, but you know, if you wanted to use this tool in the winter to do the same set of birds, you'd have to make a whole new one. So it's a very big flaw with the method. And then when it came to collecting the songs, I collected a lot myself, but that was impractical for me to get 250 for each bird. So Xenocanto is an online database where you just look up the name of the bird. So I've looked up Skylark on this one, and you just download the recordings. People put them on and you can verify them yourself. And then from those recordings, I've gone through each one and split it into these 5-second segments to get 250 5-second songs for each bird. So I did that on Raven Pro. So it was quite simple. You can see there's 3 5-second segments there for the yellowhammer. So I'll play the yellowhammer's call. And has anyone heard people say that they call it like a little bit of bread with no cheese?
Yeah.
I don't know what people are talking about. I really don't get it. But for the birds like this, it's just the 5-second segments you can see like visualised really well, how easy it is to split up. But then for other birds like the lapwing, I'm proud of that transition. If you listen, they just it's so irregular that you couldn't put that into 5-second segments, so instead we took just random, like every 5 seconds was one, and across the 250 it evened out to like a pretty recognisable for the species. It's also very unique that there's such a strange noise. So then for the field recordings that we supplemented the data with, we use these things called audio muffs, so they're just little computer microphones. You can see one on the right that I've put up at Gosforth Nature Reserve. So they have enough storage for about 2 weeks, recording for an hour at dawn, which was 4 to 5, an hour at dusk. And so you can get like a good amount of data for the storage at the time that they're out for. And then, so this is a blackbird, which you might hear singing, but one of the issues I found with both of the 2 sites I'll bring up in a minute is that when you've got a blackbird, and then you've got a busy road, and then you've got people walking around, and then you've got the wind, the blackbird's gone. It's very hard to hear. So it was trying to make these things the most consistent was the best I could do. So both sites up near similar sized roads, and the recording periods were out of the opening times for Gosforth, and no one was visiting the other site around then. So then I'm going to play another recording now, and I want people, you just do it in your head, to count how many times they hear a blackbird. Like how many different blackbirds you think are present. So the number of individuals. So BirdNet Analyzer, which is one of the existing AI tools like Merlin, has identified 7 blackbirds, and the list was a bit longer. So it's telling you from the data that there's at least 7 blackbirds there, but what you have to recognise is as it takes 1-second segments and identifies it, this is not like accurate. This is one bird being detected multiple times. So the file had 1 blackbird in. So you can't get species counts, which is a mistake some researchers made, because you're saying there's way more individuals than there are. And then these are the 2 sites I was looking at, so I'm sure most of you are familiar with Gosforth, but Walsington Parish Ponds is one of the sites on the Ousburn Trail stuff. So I've been doing some surveying there, and it's a very similar site. It's got a main road near it, and then it's got a good mix of sort of woodland and wetland. So a good variety of birds. And then both of these sites are adjacent to farmland. So that's how we're getting the farmland birds there. And then at the site, these are the places I put the audio maps out. So there were 6 microphones at each site, and they're just as spread out across the site, sort of. So you don't want to record the same bird on multiple devices, but you also want to get good coverage of the whole site. So you might be more familiar with Gosford for how sort of spread out they are, but yeah. And then with the 250 calls times the 11 birds, we split that into 80% training and then 20% testing. So you make this Edge Impulse, which is the website for this, it does it all for you, but you basically train an AI and then you run the rest of the data to test it just to make sure it's accurate, and it gives you then the accuracy. So if we look here, the headings aren't very clear, but along the top is the 11 birds, and then along the bottom, and then the green. So the green line is like chiff-chaff against chiff-chaff. So 100% of the calls were identified correctly. And then there's a slight bit in the middle there where grey, partridge and lapwing are getting the most confused. So that would just, if I had more time, I'd go back and add more calls for the individuals because they don't sound too similar. So there's been some error with the data, or there just needs to be more. And then we came out at 93.82% accurate, which is a lot better than Merlin, and I was very happy about. I'm always surprised by, but it is only for 10 species, so I know in the summer, I know on farmland, so I won't lag myself too much. And then, so the successful goals, we've made the AI model, so we're currently working with my supervisor to make it into a website that anyone here could upload just a normal audio file to it and tell you if those 10 birds are present. And then there's also the sort of the methodology for landowners to easily put the microphones out, do a 2-week standardised survey and bring them back in, and put it through this website once it's running. But the problem is it does take a lot of time and knowledge still. You still need someone trained, or me, to make it. But then once you've made it, it's good. And it's only good for that very niche thing that you're trying to survey for. But like you could do it for wetland birds in winter, or whatever you want. You just have to take that big bit of time to create it, and then you can use it as much as you need afterwards. And yeah, and then we've got the workflow developed for people to do that. So if another student in following years at the university wants to make one for wetland birds, they have all of the the 5-second segments and all of that is planned out, ready for people to use and to make it for similar species. And then finally, for me on this project, I'm doing my dissertation at the minute, so I'm now looking to use the recordings I gather at the sites to fully ID the birds that are there, and I'm looking at the proximity of urbanisation on farmland areas instead. So Gosford Nature Reserve is a lot more more urban proximity to Walsington, so just looking at the comparison using the birds. So that's like a more applied use of it. And then thank you very much. I've got a little video, so thank you.